How's it going, guys? White Rabbit here. I'd like to talk to you all today about the homosexual agenda. Now, unfortunately, this is an extremely sensitive topic to most people, and I am sure to upset people on both sides of the aisles on this issue with this video, but for some reason I still feel compelled to cover this issue because it is an obvious agenda being perpetuated by the powers that shouldn't be. Now, I am a Bible-believing Christian, but I assure you that my aim in making this video is in no way meant to demean or insult anyone. It is a message, hopefully, of clarity, and it is only out of concern that I'm making this video. Jesus told us that he who is without sin cast the first stone. In other words, we have all sinned, so it is not our place to judge one another, it is God's. Having said that, serious sins like homosexuality being constantly shoved down our throat and not only becoming normalized but celebrated should be very disturbing to people who are awake. It's obvious that they're pushing this agenda, but the question that many of you probably have is why? So, in this video, I want to kind of discuss and clarify what the history of homosexuality is, particularly in the occult. I want to talk a little bit about what the Bible has to say about it, and I want to talk about some of the ways that it is being perpetuated. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, to start off with, let me first explain to you my background with the homosexual community so that you can get a better grasp on where I'm coming from. Growing up, I have had numerous friends who identified as homosexual. In fact, I would dare to say that the majority of my close friends identified as homosexual. So believe me when I say this is not out of hate that I'm coming to you, but out of love and out of concern. Through my own life experience, I myself at one point questioned and struggled with my own sexuality. And looking back on that and that experience, I've really gained more of an understanding of the psychological element to homosexuality, but also the spiritual relation to it. You see, whether we like to admit it or not, when something is continually pushed on you, you begin to believe it. And it's just like with anything. We are easily corrupted. We are easily manipulated to believe certain things. Well, growing up, I was always a particularly shy person, but I also had 3 sisters. And I think because of that, I guess I was a little more in touch with my feminine side than most people. And not that I was flamboyant or wore woman's clothing or anything like that, but I did certainly have a little more sympathy for others and things of that nature. So naturally, while growing up, many people questioned me on a regular basis on my sexual orientation, including my own parents and my own family. Now, I never considered myself to be gay, but after a while, when you are constantly getting asked this question, and at the same time, society is gradually gaining acceptance for that lifestyle, I began to question it myself. Maybe I was gay. Well, like I said, this was a long time ago, and thankfully, I've gotten past this. I've been able to decipher and sift through the malarkey that is homosexuality, and I am now comfortable in my own skin, as God intended. But I wanted to bring that up to just let you guys understand where I'm coming from on this issue. And when I speak on this issue, it's one that I have a great amount of personal experience and triumph with. Now, in my own personal experience, let me explain to you what I have found to be the case in nearly all the homosexuals that I have encountered in my life. It is my firm belief, like I said, that it is not only a physical, but also a spiritual conflict within an individual. It appears to me that on some level, on some genetic platform, some individuals are more or less susceptible to homosexual persuasions. And I believe that that genetic makeup is somehow triggered by trauma at an early stage in life. And I also believe that people who are surrounded by demons, literal spiritual beings, demons, which I know for a fact do exist because I've seen them personally, but that's a discussion for a whole nother time, are more susceptible to giving in to that physical desire. It also goes hand in hand with Satan wanting people to worship him and to worship the things of this world. And what do demons do? They constantly push you towards earthly things. And homosexuality is one of the most physical and lustful sins that one can commit. And so it would make sense that demons who may or may not be aware of your genetic makeup would want to tempt you and push you towards that kind of lifestyle. Now, why do I say this? Well, I never experienced trauma growing up. I actually had a very positive upbringing. But I do believe that I had some kind of genetic makeup that left me, at least on some level, susceptible to homosexual persuasions. And I do believe that demons in my own personal life led me towards that road. I will also just quickly say that in all the people that I've known who identify as homosexual, they all had some kind of traumatic life experience growing up. And they were also all surrounded heavily by demons. Now, mind you, I'm not calling these people evil, all right? And I'm not damning them to hell or anything like that. I'm just telling you how it is. And in more cases than not, homosexuality was just one of many horrible sins that these people were committing. But again, it's not because they were evil. It's because they're deceived. They're misled. I'd like to point out a comparison for you. A lot of time, people who are anti-homosexual will compare homosexuality to bestiality. And while I can see the comparison there, I think there's a much better comparison that can be made. And that is comparing homosexuality in a way to pedophilia. Now, if you watch the news and you see, for example, a 30 or 40-year-old teacher sleeping with their high school student who is, let's say 15 or 16 years old, most people would be disgusted by that and would not hesitate to believe that that should be against the law and then that teacher should be thrown in jail. And I'm just using this to illustrate my point, so hear me out on this. But in the case of homosexuality, it's actually a very similar thing, because in more cases than not, you have the dominant homosexual who attempts to court or persuade another member of the same gender to partake in a physical embrace. Now the thing is, especially younger people, who it seems more and more today are moving towards that lifestyle, they're usually people who are just spiritually misguided, to be quite frank. And so it could be viewed as a very similar situation. And the other more important part to this, which is why I think this is a more accurate comparison, is that when you see a pedophile, or you know that somebody's a pedophile, people look at it in a very different light than they do homosexuals nowadays. People look at a pedophile and think to themselves that they should be able to control their sexual urges, and that there is no reason that they should act on those impulses. Yet, when they look at a homosexual, they have nowadays the opposite response. They think that they should act on those impulses. And that to me is just a sign that there is something very backwards about our whole society. And now, I'm not talking about the laws, okay? When it comes to gay marriage laws and things like that, personally, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. If two people want to commit themselves to a life of sin, they're going to do it with or without laws. So the whole gay marriage thing, it's really a non-issue to me. And in general, I believe the fewer laws and restrictions placed on us by our government agencies, the better. But this brings me to the point that people think that you're born homosexual and that you can't change, and that people who identify as homosexual are just homosexual and that we should accept it. But the fact is, just like with a pedophile, they don't have to act on those impulses. A pedophile doesn't have to sleep with a child. And someone who has homosexual impulses doesn't have to sleep with someone of the same gender. And people assume that if you're gay type of thing, and that there's no cure, if you will. But what I'm getting at here is that homosexuality is actually a manifestation of demons and of corruption of the flesh. There is, in my belief, a genetic disposition that allows someone to be more or less susceptible to homosexual desires based on the demons surrounding them and also personal trauma. And the truth is, and what our society now doesn't want you to know for whatever reason, is that there is a way out of that lifestyle. There is a way out of that frame of thought and those lustful feelings. And that way is Jesus Christ. And this is this sounds crazy to people, to non-believers. It sounds absolutely absurd, and I get that. But it's true. Once you become saved, and once you become a true believer in Christ, it's not that the Bible and the commandments suppress you and inhibit your ability to live how you want to live. That's not what those commandments and rules in the Bible are about. And I think this is something that people get very confused about. Those commandments and the rules that we are meant to follow, laid out for us in the Bible, are there to protect us and are there to ensure that we live a happy and fulfilled life. You have to look at God as your Father and the rules that He wants us to follow that are present in the Bible, just as a father would give rules to a child. Now, a child may look at those rules. Take, for example, playing in the street. A child would look at those rules and think, well, what if I want to play in the street? I'm just going to go ahead and play in the street anyway. But they don't really understand that the reason that their father doesn't want them to play in the street is not because they're a mean father or they're trying to suppress their child in any way. It's because they don't want their child being hit by a car. And that's what the commandments are, people. They're there to protect us. And yes, even the commandments about not worshiping false idols. And if you watch one of my earlier videos about Saturn symbolism on that series that I've started, you'll understand how dangerous some of those false idols can be and how they all wrap back to Satan. It's because he doesn't want you worshiping Satan. You have to realize that these rules in the Bible are there for us because God loves us and because He wants us to live a happy and fulfilled life. And there's a whole lot more than 10, by the way. And when I say that homosexuality is the manifestation of demons corrupting the spirit, that's exactly what it is. Because as my belief is, some people have a part of them that they may or may not be born with that leaves them susceptible to certain persuasions. For example, some people are more or less inclined as they get older to have homosexual persuasions, just as some people growing up are more or less inclined to have alcoholic persuasions. They're very much the same thing. And the thing is, as you get older and as you begin to let down your guard and allow these demons to surround you, they accumulate and they pile up. And before you know it, you're surrounded by 100 different demons and you don't even realize it. And it overpowers you after a while. And you give in to these temptations. And sometimes giving in to those temptations manifest in different ways. And I think that's what is dependent on your genetic makeup, as well as the type of trauma that you may or may not have endured growing up. And I hear a lot of people say, God made me this way. And this is another big misunderstanding that I think people don't quite fully understand. Did God make you? Yes, of course he did. But God made your spirit. And there's a big difference. Because God made Adam and Eve, okay? And he continues to make spirits for each one of us. And those spirits are created when a man and a woman lay together, when a woman becomes pregnant with the seed of a man. But there are a whole lot more variables that go into play than just that. And like I said, God made Adam and Eve. But since the fall from grace, man's seed had become corrupted. So God made Adam and Eve as they were. He made them perfect, both spiritually and physically. And we are descendants from them. And between the time of Adam and Eve and Noah, through the aid of fallen angels, or as some people think that they are, aliens, man's seed became corrupted. And the only pure human left on the face of the planet was Noah and his sons. But God made your spirit perfect. That is true. And God made Adam and Eve in their own image, meaning Adam and Eve were flawless. But over time, and with the aid of sin and the corruption of this world, we have become corrupted. And sometimes those genes get through and pass from generation to generation. Take, for example, autistic children. Did God really make that child autistic on purpose? Probably not. Somewhere down the road, I guarantee you that that child became autistic due to some form of recessed gene, or maybe even a vaccine or shot that the mother took while she was pregnant, or that the baby took right after being born. You know, there's all kinds of different things that factor into this. God makes a perfect spirit, and yes, we are all perfect. But don't be fooled into thinking that that means you're perfect on a physical level as well, because our flesh has been corrupted, all of us, on some level. Some of us carry genes that manifestate as ADHD, some as autism, some as alcoholism, and yes, some even as homosexuality. That's not God's doing, though. Somewhere down the line, that was the result of sin. That was the result of this world. Now, the good news is, like I've said before, the answer to homosexuality is Jesus Christ. And again, some people think that in order to be a Christian or to have a strong faith in the Bible means kind of having a boring life. And some think that it sucks the fun out of things. But the truth is, when you become a Christian and truly give yourself over to the Lord and put all of your faith and love in Jesus Christ, you will find that your worldly desires will begin to change. I promise you. It happened to me. And I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't truly believe and have first-hand experience with this. Folks, Jesus Christ takes away your earthly desires. And so you will not be consumed by homosexual thoughts anymore. And you will not be consumed with a driving force to drink. And you will easily be able to repel these demons surrounding you as soon as you let him into your life. It will become a night and day difference to you. I promise you that. True Christians don't follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ and try to obey God's rules because they have to, but because they want to. Alright, sorry if I was rambling on there, but I had to make sure that I told you all that so that I could lay a foundation on which we can now build so that you can fully understand the roots and the true purpose of the gay agenda. Alright, so let's jump now to the word itself, gay. Where does the word gay come from? And why doesn't it just mean happy anymore? The origins of the word gay come from the 12th century in England, and it's derived from an old French word, G-A-I, which in all actuality was probably a Germanic word first, though it's completely unknown. The original meaning of it meant joyful, carefree, full of mirth, or bright and showy. Now, around the 17th century, the word became associated with immorality. And by then, the Oxford Dictionary definition was changed to mean addicted to pleasures. Often, euphemistically, of loose or immoral life. And this was an extension of one of the word's original meanings, which was carefree. Now, fast forward from the 17th century to the 19th century, and the word gay referred to a woman who was a prostitute, and a gay man was someone who slept with a lot of women, often prostitutes. So it's kind of ironic that today, a gay man doesn't sleep with women. Also around that time, the phrase gay it meant to have sex. With these new definitions, the original meanings carefree, joyful, bright and showy were still around, so the word was not exclusively used to refer to prostitutes or promiscuous men. Those were just accepted definitions, along with the other meanings of the word. But around the 1920s and 1930s, however, the word started to get new meaning, and in terms of the sexual meaning of the word, a gay man no longer just meant a man who had sex with a lot of women, but started to refer to a man who had sex with other men. By about 1955, the word gay officially acquired the new definition of meaning homosexual males. So I wanted to kind of lay that all out for you so that you could see how the origins of the word itself help to explain how someone would be overcome by homosexual tendencies. Homosexuality is equivalent to an addiction. It's an outcome of lustful desires. It originates not in the spirit, but in the flesh, and it is driven by demonic influence. Some of you may begin to realize where I'm headed with this. Homosexuality is an asset to the occult. Here's the thing, guys. Satan not only wants to be like God and to be God, he also wants to make a mockery of God. And whether you like it or not, God created man and woman. He intended man to be with woman, and homosexuality is a mockery of that. If you look deep into the occult groups, you will find that they are all, in actuality, giant sex cults, basically. And the majority of them are heavy into homosexuality. And the reason for that is because it directly goes against God's wishes on a very fundamental level. And as a result, it actually draws in demonic energy and demonic spirits, because demons are attracted to sin and evil. And that's why if sometimes you go to a haunted house or something like that where something truly horrific had happened, a gruesome murder or something, and you may feel the presence of what you think to be ghosts, well, those ghosts are actually demonic spirits that have been attracted to that place because of something that was truly awful and evil that happened within this realm that made waves into another dimension. I know it sounds a little far out there and it sounds a little crazy, but that's just how these things work. I've seen it firsthand, and all of my research has corroborated this. This is what's going on. There's not just a physical element to this world, guys. There's a spiritual one. And these occult groups want to draw in as many demonic spirits as they can because they believe that it gives them more power. This, of course, is one of Satan's biggest lies, but it's important to understand that that's why these occultic groups are not only sex cults, but also, most of the time, homosexual cults. They're also often intertwined with pedophilia, and I'm not going to take you down that road, but it gets pretty dark. So, why does the Bible take such a strong stance against homosexuality? I mean, besides the obvious. The reason is because for the vast majority of history, and the further back in history you go, the more true this is, homosexuality was almost entirely contained into satanic cults or other mystical cults of some kind that ultimately all come back to Satanism anyway, but basically the vast majority of homosexuals were part of satanic cults and occult groups. The problem was, at least for them, homosexuality was not only going against God's wishes, it was also going against the law, and it was extremely rare. Now again, this is one of those things where people want you to believe that this many homosexuals that we see today is how it's always been. They've just been afraid of coming out. And folks, that's not true, okay? There are a whole slew of reasons why there are more homosexuals today than there were in the past. And it has to do with a lot of different factors, from the genetically modified food that we eat, the societal influences that are corrupting our children's minds, broken families. I mean, there are all kinds of things that contribute to why there are so many homosexuals nowadays. But back then there wasn't as many. And in a lot of cases, just about all cases in fact, if a homosexual wanted to act on those lustful impulses outside of their occult group, they would literally go and rape people. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. And then I want you to realize that when the Bible says that a man who lay with another man should be put to death, that's why. Because they were either in the occult doing atrocious things, not just against God, but against humanity, or they were actually going around and raping people. And since God knows that homosexuality is nothing but the manifestation of sin and demonic influence, when his advice is to kill these people as their punishment, is because he is fearful for the rest of us and the impact that letting that person go unpunished will have as time goes by, the ripple effect that it will cause. So God advises us to kill that person, essentially just send them to him and he'll sort them out. Now, I know this is a pretty gruesome topic, and it's not exactly something that you would picture someone in the 21st century talking about. Because when you look around now, our society has taken this horrifically evil and demonic thing and has turned it from something of disgust to something of positivity. That doesn't automatically mean that homosexuality is now a good thing. All that means is that we are now more deceived than ever. Now, I'm not saying to go around and start killing homosexuals. That's not what I'm saying, and I am not endorsing that. But I want you to understand where that came from in the Bible, okay? Because reading that in today's world does sound absolutely insane. But I wanted you to understand God's reasoning for that. It was for our own good, and it was for the good of this world. And now we're at the point where it's just flat out too late. And that's really not an option anymore. And now it is up to us, both truthers and Christians, to spread the word of God and the message of Jesus Christ, to win over these souls to Christ so that they can heal and so that they can participate in this world as God intended, and so that they can live a truly happy and fulfilling life. Our God is the most forgiving God you could ever imagine, and you may have a tainted view of him. But again, it's like the father telling his child not to play in the street. He's really just trying to look out for us. Unfortunately, at this point, I think we've already been hit by the car, and all we can do now is send up one final prayer on the way to the hospital. Ooh, sorry guys, didn't mean to get too deep on you there. But I think I'll just wrap up the video there. I think I've rambled for long enough here. Thank you guys for sticking through all the way to the end. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Thanks, and God bless.